We're going to continue on down the esophagus. So you chew up your food, your salivary glands are going to produce enzymes that are going to start dissolving your food, and then you're going to chew, swallow, and then a bolus is going to travel down your esophagus. And where your esophagus meets the body of your stomach is called the cardia. It's right around the level of the heart. In fact, this sphincter or this narrowing of muscle here is called the cardiac sphincter. It's also called the inferior esophageal sphincter. So either of those would work. And if you remember, the diaphragm sits on top. So the esophagus passes through the diaphragm. And this upper part of the stomach is called the fundus, and the fundus sits right up underneath the diaphragm. So then you have these two curves, and we kind of talked about these curves when we did the blood vessels. The inside curve is called the lesser curvature, and the outside curve is called the greater curvature. And then the stomach, it's actually not as nice and kidney bean shaped like this. It's actually just more flat and banana shaped in my opinion. But where it starts to narrow here at the bottom is called the pylorus. And at the end of the pylorus is a little narrowing of the muscle wall, and it is called the pyloric sphincter. So the inside of the stomach has a modification of the inner wall where it forms these folds in here. And these are called gastric folds, and they allow for expansion of the stomach. And within those gastric folds are like the gastric pits and all the different types of histological features that, thank goodness, you don't have to worry about in lab. But I'm sure that it'll come up in lecture. So after the pyloric sphincter is where the duodenum begins, and the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. But let's talk about the greater omentum and the lesser omentum first, and I'm actually going to talk about the mesentery proper while I'm at it. So our digestive organs are also encased in a bag, just like your heart and your lungs were, but it's not a nice, neat little bag like the others. It kind of does a weird shrink wrap action. So you've got, if you remember the picture of the sideways picture of the different mesenteries of the peritoneal cavity, the peritoneal cavity, the linings of that peritoneal cavity are these omentums. So the liver gets wrapped up in peritoneum, which is another name for the bag that surrounds the organs. The peritoneum, and then the two layers of the peritoneum come together and merge together, and then they engulf the stomach, and then they merge together again and continue on and form a sheet that covers all of your small and large intestine. So the one that spans the little sheet, dual membrane sheet that spans between the liver and the stomach, the lesser curvature of the stomach, is called the lesser omentum. And this one that covers your abdominal cavity is called the greater omentum. So on our torso model, the greater omentum they show as looking like this. It's just an apron. Clearly this is half of it that sits over the top of your abdominal organs. So if you were to have an abdominal surgery, they would need to cut through your skin, the underlying adipose tissue, your abdominal muscles, and the rectus sheaths, and then they would have to cut through these greater omentum, and then you would be in the abdominal cavity. So the small intestine also have a little encasing around them, and where the two layers of the encasing are merged together, it forms this fan shape that keeps the small intestine all tightly compact. So just not like in the horror movies where someone gets disemboweled and all their guts come spilling out. Your intestines are organized within these mesenteries, so you wouldn't be able to pull it out in one big long tube very easily. So this one that is between the small intestine, the loops of the small intestine, is called the mesentery proper. You can see here that the greater omentum, they flipped up the greater omentum, so it's revealing the abdominal cavity. So this image is from the McGraw-Hill Connect, and it's a mid-sagittal cut of the torso. So you can see the lumen of some of the tubes in the digestive system. But what I wanted to show you here is this is where the greater omentum sits in the abdominal cavity. And this is a cross-section of the liver, just kind of orienting you to what you see there. I also want to show you, let's see here, this view right here. So this is showing you the greater omentum. Between the liver and the stomach is the lesser omentum. And then here's a picture of the mesentery proper between the small intestine loops.